Okay,
It's a toughie.
It's a toughie. We're rolling?
Stand by. So then we have speed, please. Speed. Good.
Okay, thanks. Marty, let's sort of start back at the, are you guys okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Sit back in your chair.
I am paying attention. What?
Let's sort of start in the very beginning. A very good place to start. Let's start a little bit closer in. Let's start in the 60s. San Francisco. What was it like?
It was a town full of, I don't know, energy like it is now. It's just there's always something happening. The town is just creative kind of city. You know, there's always little theater. There's always new music. There's always dance companies. There's performance art going on. It's like New York. There's a lot of energy in this place and a lot of creativity coming on. And at that time in the 60s, there were a lot of people who were bouncing around in that creativity, but they wanted to do something different and something new and something original. So rock and roll was the outlet for a lot of that energy and a lot of that direction. In fact, I remember in the 60s thinking of either being in a band or starting a newspaper, telling people what was going on and communicating all the different fractions like Rolling Stone, or being in a light show because I was interested in painting and creating in that form, or doing posters. I mean, I was attracted to all the different mediums that were around the scene at the time. But I ended up in the rock band side of it. And there was a lot of people with fresh new ideas who came together and like most great movements, you know, came together and started putting on a show. There was Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland.
Oh, they had some costumes at a bar.
Oh, hey, really? And then Bill Graham.
And then Bill Graham. When did you first meet Bill Graham?
Actually, I first met Bill Graham. I was a dancer in a show, and he had gotten a part. This was Guys and Dolls. I was in the chorus, and he came in to play Big Julie. And he got the part, but he kept telling the director what to do and how to direct the show. And so the director and him kept fighting, and eventually he got fired, you know. That was my first thing I've ever seen him. And then later I was rehearsing the airplane at the Mime Troupe. And he was in the back office there, and I recognized him, and he recognized me, and we started talking. And he'd ask us what we were doing. I said we were doing rock and roll, and there's a whole world going on here of, you know, new young bands. And he asked us to come play for the Mime Troupe benefit, along with the Dead and some of the other people, Big Brother. And that's when we first, you know, became friends.
How important has Bill been in your life as a musician? And how important do you think he's been to the total musical development in San Francisco?
I think he's the most important person that ever came along in a long time in music. He was like, before Bill Graham, there weren't even sound systems. There wasn't any sophisticated kind of stage presentation of music. It was like American Legion halls. It was like back rooms with little columns for speakers. And at the time that I was in rock and roll, I used to think, God, if it's like this for me, what was it like for Elvis and, you know, Little Richard, those guys? You know, they must have had a hard time playing. And then when Bill came along, he started putting it out, you know, with a little more class and doing things with big sound systems, and there were local people who started developing amplifiers and would give them to the bands, and a lot of experimentation and new ideas were happening too, because there was these drug manufacturers who were creating these new drugs who would use this scene to experiment on and would give it out free to mostly everybody in the scene. So a lot of things were, you know, pretty drug-oriented expression happening. I mean, it was a lot of freedom happening because a lot of people we'd always have drugs out there so people could indulge, and it wasn't illegal at this time, these drugs. So everybody was experimenting like that. And so that gave a lot of impetus to what was happening too, because people were changing things and just expressing themselves however which way they wanted. You know, I remember people bringing in amplifiers for bands to try and saying, well, you can't wreck this one, and guys would plug in and blow it out immediately, and then, oh God, you know, they go back and try it again. I mean, there was a whole new realm of creativity happening that was going on in San Francisco and LA at the same time in a smaller way.
How aware do you think musicians were of the socio-political happenings of the time? Did it have any effect on the music you were making?
I think it did. I think there were a lot of things to talk about. There were a lot of things to play. I remember playing for colleges, and we were always the band that was called in to play for a college. When a college was taken over by the students, kids would be sleeping in the halls, and we would come walking in and play for them while they had the school. I remember playing Stop the War, free gigs. The airplane started putting on free gigs before anybody did that. We used to play a gig, and then the next day we'd say we'd be in a park for free. Come, and everybody would come, bring their kids. And it was a more delightful time than actually the concert. But that was like, put up, and sometimes people would come and speak and talk about the war, and we were pretty involved in all that kind of stuff, just like everybody was. I mean, it wasn't just the bands, it was everybody. We were only just doing what everybody was doing, speaking out, and we felt there were a lot of important issues. And there was a real line drawn between us and them at that time, and it was easy to see where you stood. There was a very important political thing going on at the time. I didn't realize how important it was, because from where I worked every day and every night. Bill Graham was my manager, so we were working all the time, and we were speaking for these people at times, but yet I felt out of a lot of it, because to me I was just working. I'd come and lead the crowd and then cheer them on and get everything going and have them a good time, but I didn't know, too much of everything that was going on out there.
I think it's really hard when you're involved in a situation like that, or to really see the overview.
Yeah.
Now I think so many people look back on the 60s and see the importance and the overview, but when you're living through it and it's a day-to-day experience, as with anything, I think you really see it. How did the Jefferson Airplane get together?
Got together because I wanted to do a band and make some money to go to Europe, basically. So I figured the first easiest way to make money would be to start a band and put together these guys, and I looked for guys and found guys. First I found Paul, and I found Jorma, and I picked everybody just the way they looked. I never heard them play, I'm like that. I look at a person, I can see their aura, like, I can tell by their vibrations if I like them or not. And I usually work with people that way, so we picked these people and put together a band, and I found that there was no place to play in this town at the time. And so I built my own nightclub, and it was called The Matrix, and it was the first rock club in town. And the opening night, it was a gigantic success. We had told everybody and built it up, and people in this town would say, "What's a Jefferson Airplane? I don't know," So everybody came to see what it was, and the opening night was great. The opening night, there was every record company in the world sitting in the audience. It was amazing. And we came off the stage, and the guys were real eager, and I said, "Oh, no, we're not going to do anything until we hear from Phil Spector." And the next night, Phil Spector's sister was sitting in the audience and said, "Phil Spector wants to see you," So we flew down to L.A., met Phil Spector, and that was a real nothing trip. We walked out on the guy. But it was just, instant, it took off, because people were looking for new things, and everybody was having a good time, and rock and roll was just the most happening thing going at the time,
Where'd the name come from?
I was a friend of Jorma Kaukonen's, a guitar player. He had a friend who had a little dog called Thomas Jefferson Airplane. And one day, we couldn't think of a name, because everybody had these animal names, and the birds, or So we couldn't think of anything, but one day Jorma said, "Why don't we call ourselves Jefferson Airplane?" And we laughed and thought that was stupid, the craziest thing we ever heard. So in talking to each of our friends, we'd say all the names and run them by them, and they'd go, Then we'd say Jefferson Airplane, and they'd, "Oh, God, that's stupid." So that sort of became our philosophy, We thought, geez, anything that makes people laugh's got to be all right, So the opening night, we walked out, and we said, "Hi, we're Jefferson Airplane," and we just, "Okay, we're Jefferson Airplane." And that was it, And the name, became a kind of a new way of calling yourself something, and took off, and had a lot to do with things, just because it was so odd.
Now, tell me a little bit about the dances. I mean, I personally am fascinated by, in the research that I've been reading, about
Excuse me, just
Excuse me.
almost done. You pull it back just about 6 inches to give me some room. I'm sorry.
The dances, you mean?
Graham's dancing.
Uh-huh.
Stand by. We're here as soon as Bob's clear.
What's that? I personally am fascinated by the dances and the concept. I don't really understand why they were so popular. Why do you think people needed to dance at that time? And were you guys writing music for people to dance to, or were people just dancing to your music?
People just dance, I think, to anything, you know. People like to express themselves and be a part of the music. If you hear music, you want to move. And when I was a little boy in church, you know, if we got a rockin', you know, I'm talking about, you know, Baptist kind of singing and stuff, you know. I mean, it was to move, to express yourself. If you didn't sing, people dance. I just think it's synonymous, music and dancing. I mean, I can't hear music without moving, you know, and very few people can, I think. So people just dance, I don't know. And of course there was lots of drugs. And when you take a lot of drugs, you have to move. You can't just sit still. You want to express yourself, you know. I think that had a lot to do with it. Because in the first days of dances, you know, there'd be large vats in the middle of a room for people, a punch. That punch was powerful, you know. One sip and you were gone for days. You know, and people didn't know that. They would just come, oh, free punch, hey, we're going to listen to the band. Hi. Then pretty soon they're crawling on the walls, you know. It was amazing. But we did that all the time. And, you know, I can remember just playing for audiences with bags of orange sunshine and just throwing it out by handfuls, you know. I mean, we had bags of this stuff, you know, and the FBI would be on the hill watching us with these glasses, you know. But it wasn't illegal, you know. They'd try to bust us. They'd find this stuff. And we'd say it's, you know, acid. But there were no laws against it at the time. So there were about 2-3 years there where, you know, just people, I remember people dancing in mud, you know, just going crazy, you know, taking your clothes off. I mean, it was just express yourself. I don't know if you've ever had acid, but acid is just immediate, you know, it gets you right down to your real self. And if music's playing, it takes you away, you know. Music is just take you away. You don't need drugs for that, but
No.
in the 60s, that was a very powerful opener for a lot of people, you know.